All right, let's get started making a haunted house. Let's go ahead and start by grabbing a box. We're going to scale this in. We're going to scale this out. And what we want to do here is we're going to make a wall. And we're going to take this wall and we're going to put some paneling on it. Then we're going to duplicate it. And we're going to use this for creating our other walls. So we can basically make the wall anywhere between 1 to 3 millimeters thick. Go ahead and pick a size that's going to work for you. I'm going to stick with something around 154 millimeters, and we're going to make our walls a little bit thinner. And we're going to take this and we're going to use this to start making our panels, and we'll put a little small angle on it and then duplicate that and use Control D or Command D to basically repeat a pattern. So I'm going to change my snap grid. You'll see me go back and forth between 0.1 millimeters and 1 millimeter quite often, depending on the level of precision that I need. Sometimes if I want to move something really quickly, I'll change it to 1. But if I need really precise control, I'll bring it down to 0.1 millimeter. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm just doing Control D, duplicate, and bring that pattern on down. And if I happen to create anything extra, I'll just go ahead and delete that. See, we don't need that going below our work plane, so I can just go ahead and delete it. So that looks pretty good. Now, it's going to be a haunted house or a spooky house, so let's make it a darker color. So we can make it dark gray or black, whatever you prefer. Once you're happy with how that looks, we're going to go ahead and duplicate that, rotate it into place. We're going to obviously do the front of the house, the side, and the back of the house. Now, I don't want this to be as wide in the front, so you saw me just change it to 145 millimeters. Everything else looks pretty good. Once again, you go ahead and adjust the numbers based on what you like. So make mine a little bit smaller. So now we're going to bring this back over to 1 millimeter, just to bring that over faster, using the arrow keys to nudge across the work plane. Just zooming in and just doing a little bit of refinements here. Trying to get that right up to the edge. And then duplicate and bring that extra wall to the back of our house. Once again, zoom in, nudge. Want to make sure things line up just the way you want. So I drop that back down to 0.1 millimeter, do a little orbit around the work plane and take a look. Reset to a home view, and that looks pretty good. So now let's go ahead and grab another box, and we're going to start building a few more elements. So now what I want is to basically kind of create kind of two ground planes. So we're going to build one that's going to serve as our foundation of the house, and we're going to build another one that will serve as the ground. And we're going to build a few little elements to put in the front of the house. I'll end up using a pumpkin that I made earlier, and I saved that as my own personal design to reuse later. And I'm going to build maybe some tombstones to put in front of the house as well. So right now I want to go ahead and focus on making some steps. So something that people do when they're building steps in 3D, more so when they're beginners, more so than anything else, unless they're explicitly told, they may end up just kind of building the steps and they're floating. And that's fine when it's intentional and it makes sense within the design. But we want to make sure that if that's not what we meant to do, that we kind of fill in the space underneath. And you'll see me do that shortly after I finish building all of the steps. So basically just taking one step, kind of building like that kind of top level that kind of goes over the edge, and then duplicating it, moving it up, and just kind of bring it out. And then once I've done with that, I'll go ahead and take that bottom step and take the bottom portion, duplicate it, nudge it over, pull it up, duplicate, and pull it up. And then we want to make sure that we just kind of look at the details, make sure that we are nudging and scaling things in the right way so that they look like they kind of line up and we have some straight edges there. So just some precision work there, just changing our snap grid to 0.1 as needed, and then zooming in and just making sure that things look good and we're getting rid of as many gaps as possible. Now in reality, I'm not going to end up 3D printing this, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but we just want to get it looking as good as possible. Just a good practice to get into. And you'll see me kind of go back and forth between perspective and a side view, and then I'll also turn on orthographic when it comes time to doing some real precision work and making sure that everything looks the way it should look. So this is getting a little bit closer. Make a few more small refinements until it looks pretty good from a glance. All right, so that looks pretty good. All right, so now's a good time to kind of build like this foundation that I want to go underneath the house. Now this is where the steps lead up to, and depending on how big you want this to be, if you kind of want like almost like an outdoor porch area, you can make this bigger so that you could theoretically walk all the way around from the front to the back of the house. But I'm not going to do that, though it is a little tempting. So we're just going to do really just the very front. We'll put like a little mini area here where you can see some detail kind of on the front, but it's more cosmetic than anything else. So now I want to build out kind of an area here, and this is going to serve as the foundation or kind of like the columns that help build up to the next level. So we're just using this paraboloid to go along with the cylinder. And what you'll see me kind of do, which is very common, is take something, build it out, and then once it looks good, we'll go ahead and group it together, duplicate it, and then use it in another spot. Sometimes it's better to work smarter and not necessarily harder. Now I am doing some things a little bit slower just for the sake of this tutorial. I don't want to skip too many steps because I want to make sure that people kind of get a good gist of how to build this and customize it on their own. All right, so now we have 3 parts. I want to mention this is also inspired by a design that I saw for a spooky house or haunted house in a Target ad. So this doesn't look exactly like it, but it's definitely inspired by it. And it's a lot more shallow because it's not really meant to be a full house. It's meant to be more of kind of a cool front portion to the house, but it's really, really, really shallow. All right. So you see here, I decided to switch over to orthographic, and that's because it was really important to make sure that this box that I kind of put here, which is kind of like meant to be a little bit of a railing, so to speak. This is meant to basically function as an area that goes on top of these shapes that I built, or these little columns. And I put it in orthographic to make sure that basically that the box shape was sitting basically right on top or a little bit down on these circular shapes. And the thing is, when we don't put it in orthographic and we just eye it, sometimes we have areas that are floating and are not connected. And while this may not be a big deal, if everything you make is really just for the virtual world, so to speak, but if you do 3D printing, it is super important to make sure that your pieces overlap a little bit so that it will all be connected when you print, and so that pieces just don't fall off when you apply a little bit of pressure to them. All right, so we're making a little tombstone now. Very easy. 2 shapes. And then a really quick way to make sure that things are lining up correctly is make sure they have similar dimensions, right? Let's say, for example, on the X and the Y, depending on the view that you're kind of working in. Once things are similar in those dimensions, it doesn't have to be on the X, Y, and Z in this case, then you could use the align tool and then make sure they line up. And then you can go ahead and nudge. And when things line up perfectly, there'll be no seam. So I'm just going to make a little design to kind of put onto the tombstone. So once again, we're just using some basic shapes here. We're just using that box shape and the cylinder, making sure they have the same height. Then we're going to duplicate it, bring it to the other side. This is where you have a little bit of flexibility to, kind of eye things, especially if you have that snap grid down to 0.1. When we duplicate that, grab another shape. Once again, we're going to put it at a similar height. Scale it down. Then when we group it, we're going to make it a hole and scale it. That's going to go on the tombstone design. I'm just using that protractor to rotate it. I zoom in, nudge it the way that I want to, scale it the way that I want. And I'm constantly using my arrow keys to basically kind of get things looking the way that I want in terms of positioning. Once it looks good, make it a hole, select both shapes, and group. Go ahead, duplicate it, and we're going to make the second one a little bit smaller. And I think we can make the decision to duplicate, bring it to the other side, and then we can go ahead and mirror it. So we can have the smaller one on the outside. Now I grabbed a pumpkin that I made earlier. So we want to scale that down. And we can put this up here kind of on this foundation area. But I think since we can't see it fully well from the front, it's probably best to bring it on down and put it on the side of the tombstones. Just remember to always know which arrow keys do what. And remember, that's going to be impacted by the way that you're looking at your design in your virtual camera. So that looks pretty good. So you'll kind of see a common theme here. So we're using shades of gray, black, and then we're going to use yellow to bring in some contrast. So in this case here, you could use a yellow or yellow-orange color to kind of symbolize maybe that there's a light on the inside like a candle. And then I'm going to use yellow as well when building out the windows, and that will basically simulate a light being on. And it would be cool if you were to design something similar to this and actually create some simple circuits and hook up some LEDs to have this be something functional when 3D printed. Maybe that's something you can do if you have access to a 3D printer. So right now we're just kind of creating a one big door to go in the front of the house. In real life, in a house, you typically have at least two doors. But in this case, this is going to be a haunted house. It's going to be one way in and one way out. So after we're kind of done doing this pattern here, we'll go ahead and put one big doorknob and kind of put it on the right. Now, you saw there I just went and checked the top-down view just to make sure that things look decent from the top. Doesn't look necessarily perfect, but like I said, this isn't meant to be 3D printed. This is just kind of a quick little design to make a simple little haunted house. So we want things to look kind of good at a glance, but we're not necessarily looking for the highest level of precision. All right, now I want to put kind of a little roof area here. Don't forget to rotate your camera. Decide how deep you want to go and how high you want it to be. Now I am going to build obviously a little roof there. So those two will blend together. So it'll look better once we have the other roof. Okay. Now we're going to put like a little, kind of a little window here. Right? So we're going to have that little yellow glow coming from all of our windows. And we're going to make a little pattern here. So we're going to basically take this shape, duplicate it, and then build a little bit of a pattern. So we'll have this box shape, we'll make it rectangular. We're going to angle it, and then we'll have one that will be going straight up and down. So really kind of scaling things down to taste. We want things to stick out a little bit, but not necessarily too much. I often like to basically duplicate shapes, make things a whole, and then keep the original shape there. So you have cutouts. So just remember also when you are doing your rotations, you can hold down Shift. You're using the protractor to do those very precise measurements. And then also remember you can basically use your mouse or your finger inside of the protractor or outside of the protractor, depending on whether you want to rotate 1 degree at a time or 22.5. And then using the shift allows you to make that bigger rotation change. So you can just kind of see the pattern kind of as I put this together. This is something totally optional. You don't have to do it, but you'll kind of see what I'm kind of going for here. And it's really just a matter of duplicating scaling down, and then making sure that things are lined up the way you want. So often what you probably want to do when you're building things, especially things that are a little bit more complex like a house, you should go ahead and sketch out what you want it to look like first. If you have a pretty good feel for, making things relatively quickly, maybe you don't have to do very precise measurements and all that ahead of time, but you should always work from at least a sketch or some sort of reference image just so you know where you're headed. So that looks pretty good. I like the way that looks, so we can go ahead and move forward. All right, so now let's go ahead and kind of build that roof that I'm talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and stretch this out. And it's going to be really important to look at this from the front. We still have the orthographic on. And I don't want this to look like this default shape here. So we're going to end up grabbing a box that's a hole, and we're going to rotate it, and we're going to kind of cut the sides a little bit at an angle, anywhere between 15 and 25 degrees. That should kind of give it a good look on both sides. All right, so this is going to be this box now. Oh, we also want to kind of cut off the top. We don't want to have a traditional pointy roof. We want to make it flat. That's going to have a nice shape to it. Now we can go ahead and rotate those sides. So we want to make sure that's plenty big. Go ahead and rotate that. Nudge it into place. Make sure that edge lines up with that bottom corner so we can have a nice clean cut. Then we're going to duplicate that, and we're going to mirror it or flip it across the axis, and then nudge it over so we can have something similar on the opposite side of the roof. And then we can look at that. It looks pretty good. Do a little bit of a rotation. Hold down Shift, select both, group, and then move it into place. And then, of course, you can decide what color you want that to be. So it can be lighter, or you can make it a little bit darker, so it blends in a little bit more with the other shape that you made. So I see there's a little bit of overlap there, so we'll just go ahead and make some adjustments so that looks the way we want. So in this case, just kind of nudge up a little bit. I think that's starting to look better. All right, so I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead and start building out some additional elements here. So we're going to build out a couple little small areas, which will basically go on top of the roof, and these will kind of serve as an area with more windows. And we'll do a little design on there, and we'll have a little mini roof, so to speak. So we're going to go ahead and hollow this part out just so we can have something that looks kind of like a roof. Now, if you really want to be super detailed and put a pattern on here, you can, but that would make this video a bit too long. You should already kind of get the general idea of how to do it based on what I did with the siding for the walls for this kind of bottom layer of the house. So you can apply the same idea to any part of the house that you want. Just keep in mind when you make these smaller details that it will start to slow down Tinkercad if you're literally doing hundreds of these, okay? That's why I decided in this case to go with these kind of like these long panels instead of doing smaller panels and then staggering it with a pattern or going with brick. Now, going with brick does look cool, but like I said, you're going to take a performance hit. And I wanted to keep this light for this example. So if you do want to see me kind of do a brick pattern for a house, I can do that in a later video, but not today. So as you notice here with this window, we're going to have kind of like this black framing that goes around it. And we're just going to take a box, once again, make things be kind of on the skinnier side. We're going to have basically this rectangular shape that goes directly up and down. And we'll duplicate that, and we'll kind of break this into three, we'll say 2 or 3 portions. So once again, we're just kind of scaling this down the way we want. Once we get into place, we'll just go ahead and duplicate it and then nudge it on down. And then you can adjust the spacing so that it looks closer to thirds, since you have kind of 3 portions to the window. Once you're happy with it, group it all together. Make sure you have multicolor on so that you maintain those separate colors. And then just move everything to make sure that it's all one piece. And then go ahead and nudge it in so things look almost flush. And once you're happy with it, go ahead and group it and start to move it into place. Once again, I'm using the arrow keys to nudge it. And then if it looks a little bit too big, go ahead and scale it down. Now in this case, we want to pull this back some, because we want that to kind of blend in, because we want that to look like it's all part of the same structure. And if you need to, go ahead and nudge it down or make the roof a little bit taller. So once things are grouped, we can go ahead, duplicate, bring it to the other side, and then you can duplicate, bring it on back, and then we can flip or mirror. So we're going to have those windows in the back as well too. So that's looking pretty good. Now we want to do maybe a couple more windows, and these will be on the main level. And if you want, you could actually even do a window for the top part of that large door in the front, and you can make that yellow, just because some doors do have, glass at the very top section. So that's something you can do if you want to differentiate what your design looks like. But for now, we're going to focus on just doing this window. Same pattern as before, taking a box, stretching it out, duplicating, moving other parts into place, and as needed, stretch it out so that we have thirds. Duplicate, use our arrow keys to nudge, our protractor to do the appropriate rotations. Making sure we turn on multicolor. Move everything into place. Go to the front view. Do some fine tuning. And then duplicate and nudge over. And that's looking pretty good. Now we can go ahead and scale this down. Make sure everything fits on the work plane. Just a good practice when you are going to 3D print something. And here are some details. And that's it.